Good afternoon, everyone. We are now live on the live stream. Welcome to this special meeting of the Scrutiny Management Panel. I'm Councillor Matt Atkins, the chair of this panel. I'll just draw your attention to the following and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves. Safety information: if a continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with fire marshal regulations, if you signed into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out as you leave the building after today's meeting. And can I also draw everyone's attention to the fact this meeting is being live streamed. The camera does zoom in on the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind you all to turn your microphones on when speaking and off again when you've finished speaking. Members of the public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it does not disrupt the meeting, nor record those explicitly stating they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised the public seating area there is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Dave Ashmore and Councillor Cal Corkery. Councillor Judith Smythe, you're standing in for Cal Corkery. Do I have any other apologies? Councillor Stuart Brown.
Apologies from Councillor Mark Jeffrey.
Okay, well, no, he's not. Yeah, right. No apologies. He's there. Or unless he's apologising for something else. Excellent. Shall we then go around the room and introduce ourselves? Let's begin. I'll go rightwards, actually, and we'll finish back around here. So, start with you, Councillor Payne-Harris.
Councillor Scott Payne-Harris, Hills, Ward.
Councillor Ryan Bren, Drayton and Farlington, lead calling member for this.
Up at the back, actually.
Councillor Gemma New, Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Stuart Brown, Fratton Ward.
Councillor Liam Madden, Lib Dem, Nelson Ward.
Come down to you at the front now. Judith, sorry.
Councillor Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward, deputising for Councillor Cal Corkery.
Yeah, jump up to the back.
Yeah, Councillor Mark Jeffrey, St Thomas Ward.
Councillor Graham Heaney, St Jude Ward and Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you.
I'm Councillor Young. I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development.
Up at the back.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Ian Maguire, Assistant Director for Planning and Economic Growth.
Peter Bowles, City Solicitor.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Gosling, you just observing, are you here to make a deputy? Yeah, just observing. Excellent. Can I ask if there are members, if there are any declarations of interest for today's meeting? Councillor Smythe.
I've been advised that I don't have a declaration of interest, but I should let you know that I'm a member of the, I'm a shadow member of the committee where the decision was made, and I'm chair of the planning committee. But I've been advised that I don't have a personal or pecuniary interest, but I just wanted to inform you in the interest of transparency.
Thank you very much. I suspect to be helpful having your insight. Yes, Councillor Mann.
I didn't think it was a declaration until Judith's given there, but I'm the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee and was when the decision was taken last year, or the recommendation was approved last year, and I'm still the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think that's an interest.
Thank you very much. So members, we're here today because 5 members of the City Council, Councillor Ryan Brent, Benedict Swan, Councillor Lee Mason, Councillor Lewis Gosling and Councillor Daniel Weems have asked the decision to be called in for scrutiny on the basis they believe the decision has been taken without adequate information. If the panel is satisfied that the Cabinet had adequate information to make its decision, then no further action is required and the matter ends here. If the panel is not satisfied on these grounds, the panel may refer the matter back to the Cabinet member, who will then reconsider it and may, if he can either change the decision or if reapproves the decision, send it to Governance and Audit and Standards Committee for confirmation, setting out the nature of the concerns that are to be addressed. If we send it back to the Cabinet member, we should set out the concerns that are to be addressed in conjunction with the original matter. Peter Balfe, the City Solicitor, is in attendance today in case the Scrutiny Management Panel has any legal questions. The procedure is as follows. As we have no written deputations, we'll begin with Councillor Brent as the lead call-in member. We'll then, at the end of his presentation, ask any questions we have of him. There'll be a response from the responsible cabinet member, Councillor Lee Hunt. After they present their he presents his response, there'll be a opportunity to ask him questions. Then a final response can be made by Councillor Brent and a summing up of his case, followed by a summing up of the case by the lead cabinet member. That's the procedure we plan to follow. So can I ask Councillor Brent, as the lead call-in member, to present the reasons for this call-in today?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first call-in that I've ever made, and really it's more of a procedural issue. Obviously, scrutiny management won't be dealing with the decision itself. In the meeting, I made my points very clear as to why I would have made a different decision, but it's more the process with this decision. So, I mean, I'm sure members have read all of the documents in front of them, but obviously on page 11 is the reason as to why this call-in stands, would be that it is based on inaccurate or incorrect legal advice and therefore is in breach of Chapter 4, role of the City Council. I'm just going to highlight a few issues on the report, which hopefully should just reiterate the reason as to why the call-in is here. So on page 15, I'm just going to read the paragraph. I think it's useful that we've got it there. So it's to delete the decision that was made to delete paragraph 53 and amend paragraph 57 are both material changes to the Constitution and would fall under Chapter 4 of the Constitution, Section 2, whereby the decisions are reserved for the City Council and not decisions made by cabinet members. Therefore, I think that it's made me think about a few things that actually this call-in is here to highlight an issue of a cabinet member making a decision which is out of his remit based on inadequate legal advice. It also made me think of whether or not we should have more training for cabinet members to ensure that those people who hold the roles are making appropriate decisions, understand where to look for the advice that they need, and to ask the right questions. And then, I mean, really, just to finish this, on page 24, the legal implications that are written within the original report during the actual cabinet meeting, I raised my concerns, like I say, with the decision. I understand the rationale as to why the decision was made, but this is the problem, is that this is inadequate legal advice, and I think that didn't facilitate the cabinet member in making a decision, or arguably making the decision that he did, which was out of his remit and a change to the Constitution. Therefore, really, my case would be that for Scrutiny Management Panel members to consider the call-in and refer it back to the cabinet member so that he can make a decision based on adequate legal advice.
Thank you very much. Questions from the panel for the lead call-in member? Anybody have any question? Yes.
Where do you know that the council legal advice was wrong?
Thanks for the question. I never, in the speech that I've just made, indicated that the legal advice was wrong. I indicated that the legal advice was inadequate. So incorrect and inadequate are obviously two different words with different definitions. It is inadequate, not incorrect.
Yeah, follow up?
Yeah, so the follow up is then, how is it inadequate?
So I think if members were to look at the previous decision that was made or presented to Councillor Hugh Mason when he was the cabinet member at the time, there's no context. There was obviously a process that was made when Councillor Hugh Mason was the cabinet member, where that decision was then not put in place and had to go to governance, audit and standards based on the legal advice that was given. I think with this being a very, very similar decision, that actually it's not adequate because there is no information on that legal advice on a previous decision that was very, very similar. So I think that, I think that answers the question itself. To put legal advice should put decisions in context, and if there was a decision that's had legal input before which created additional hurdles in the process, then that should be put in the legal implications part of the report.
Councillor Peter Harris.
Councillor Brent, can you just, we're talking about the legal comments Do we know who the author of the legal comments was?
I think I've got a reputation for ensuring that I would never ever mention any officer's name. I do not know who the officer who was responsible for writing the legal implications, but the comment that I would make is that it highlights the decision was not necessarily made with all of the information, and I think that's a problem of the Cabinet member, not of any officers writing a report. Cabinet members hold a responsibility to ensure they are looking at correct information, or adequate information, shall we say, and that's the Cabinet member's responsibility to ensure that any decision that's being made is based on adequate information, and I think actually the ownership lies on the Cabinet member, not necessarily the author of the legal comments in the report.
Councillor Page-Harris?
Let me just rephrase that. I'll rephrase it differently. Do you believe that the comments came from a member of the legal team?
I think perhaps
I don't necessarily.
I just asked and answered. I think we'll kind of move on from that one. I don't want to get into criticising officers. I agree with Councillor Brent on that point. Councillor Mann.
It's not a question to the call-in member. It's a question to, can we have legal advice on what's been said thus far?
As in...
you know, it's not in the procedure here, Chair, that's all. But I mean, it's been...
Sure.
It's inadequate, and we've got the according to the... to Ryan, but we have Peter Balfour.
Yeah, well, if City Solicitor, do you think that's appropriate? Do you wish to comment on ways in which there may have been incomplete information in this decision or this report?
No, I couldn't really comment, but what I am prepared to say is that, you know, obviously if there is a substantial or material change to the Constitution, that's where I'm coming from, in the sense that it's made out. That's why I accepted it. I have to say, but for that, I'd have been in some difficulty accepting this at all. I'm sure you accept that. It's a lacuna in the process that we're in. What I say about the allegations of inadequate legal advice, the reality is that most of the advice is contained within the body of the report, if you read it, obviously. These are not issues that are unknown to you as members, and they will be unknown to you in future iterations of decision-making. It's just unfortunate that perhaps they weren't quite as fulsome or as linked as they normally are. And I take that as noted. Thank you.
If I could perhaps, Councillor Mann, do you want to follow up?
Thank you for that. It's just that I want to ask the question whether I'm right in thinking that because constitutional changes were referred to gas last year, these should have been referred this time. Is that really the nub?
Well, I suppose it is as the lead calling.
I think ultimately, partially yes. I think that it's a problem that the Cabinet member did not follow a process that had recent precedents on, which is in the same administration. That's a shame.
Can I just ask some clarifying questions that might help from my reading of this situation? So it's your statement essentially, Councillor Brent, that the decision to change the standing orders of the Planning Committee is a material change to the Constitution because it's within the scheme of delegation of the Constitution, so essentially 4.13 states that unless otherwise provided, it's the job of the City Council to determine the appointment, powers, duties and composition of the Cabinet panels and committees.
Correct, yeah, the change of the Constitution which was out of the power of the Cabinet member.
As I understand the City Solicitor's advice is that he doesn't find this completely clear on the process that must be followed when changing standing orders in relation to Cabinet members' decisions wishing to change the standing orders of something like, for example, the Planning Committee, but previous councils, previous people in his position have taken the decision, and this may not be something he was aware of, to refer that matter to GASC in order to ensure that there is oversight by other councillors when there is changes made to the standing orders of a semi-regulatory, quasi-judicial committee. Is that correct, Peter?
That's a fair summation, yes. Thank you.
So, essentially, the point here is being made that although there is not necessarily a clear process in the Constitution, it is a constitutional issue, and we have a past precedent that in this case the Cabinet member was not notified of and therefore did not follow in his decision. Is that correct, Councillor Brett?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Brown? In that case, Councillor Hunt.
Does precedence then overrule the Constitution?
No, but in this situation, you might find some councillors would argue that all these decisions have to be taken by full council. Some councillors would argue that they could be taken by individual cabinet members, and some might argue that GASC is a sensible compromise. And so this committee might decide that that's something that the cabinet member should have considered before making a decision to alter the standing orders of a quasi-judicial committee without talking to other councillors, I think is the point. Councillor Hunt, do you have anything you wish to say? Your statement, please.
Well, I suppose I mean, it's already been said, you've got it wrong already this afternoon. You say that I wasn't told about the reference to the gas committee, but if you actually read the report that I based my decision upon, on page 38, at 3.2, it talks about exactly that. I don't know if you've got, my report should be attached to the Scrutiny Management Panel papers.
Page 20 in the papers I got in September for this meeting, of the page numbers for this, for me.
It's 3.2 of the report.
It's 3.2 in the officer's report.
3.2. So, in accordance with the current scheme of delegation as amended in November 2021, decision plan of the development portfolio holder, Hugh Mason, following referral to the Government's Ordnance Standards Committee. So it's there, isn't it? It is there. All right. So just had to, because you all get yourself quite excited there, you know, over that. Anyway, so members, if I may, Councillor Atkins, is that right? Okay. So for a long time now, members of the council have been raising the issue about the backlog in planning applications, and I have shared that concern. And between January and May this year, before I became the cabinet portfolio holder, the offices focused entirely on getting out delegated decisions, so that they focused entirely on that, and that backlog has all but been dealt with. So that leaves the decisions that had to come to the committee. I think by now we're all aware of the things that held them up: the coronavirus problem and indeed the nitrates issue. There are, of course, also problems around staffing which you may or may not be acquainted with. These problems are not simply Portsmouth problems, they're within local government across the country. So along with the local plan, it was a priority, one of my main priorities was to work with the officers and with other councillors to try and reduce that backlog. This resulted in the recommendations that came up to my portfolio decision. The alternative members was very clear. We could either try to find something like £115,000 to employ extra planning staff. And by the way, before I'd done that, I'd already moved the cycle of planning committees up from once every 4 weeks to once every 3 weeks. So we were doing everything within our power and control to improve the situation, but we needed to improve it still further. So I talked with officers over many months and pressed the cabinet as to whether or not I could have the money, but the money was not available, because even though if we could employ those planning officers, those new planning officers, they would have to be trained, they would have to get legal advice, that would have then a ripple effect on the costs out into the legal officers and indeed to Democratic Services and all those people that support the Planning Committee. So the money doesn't grow on trees. So the other alternative was to look at raising the point at which representations or objections, whatever you want to call them, comments, would bring a matter to the Planning Committee from 3 up till 6. I was extremely mindful of the previous decision that Councillor Hugh Mason had taken and the root of that, which was to the Gas Committee. But in the end, it was Councillor Mason that made the decision, not the Gas Committee, even though there was some scrutiny there. But it was Councillor Hugh Mason. It went back to him. Now the councillors, members, I beg your pardon, can't have their cake and eat it. You know, if you want this planning backlog to come down from about 115 to a lower number, some of those things you have the members of the council or the planning committee have already loaded up the planning committee with extra cases around HMOs. So those will still have to be heard. Of the remaining number, there are about 50 or thereabouts. So if the scheme of delegation is moved up to 6 objections, that comes down, the number comes down by about half. So that means that those people that I've heard an awful lot about from members and indeed the MP, about them not having their planning application determined, let's say for about a year, which is unacceptable, that would be halved. It is also true that if in some of these cases members felt that something should still come to the committee, they have their own right to refer the matter. I have, by the way, also received representations from other members of the council that would seek to make that, to restrict that more, so that 3 members would have to bring that to the council. I'm sure we're perfectly capable of doing that. But the point is, if you want these planning applications halved, you're not going to continue to tie it down in red tape and bureaucracy, that we need to make a decision sooner rather than later, so that all these planning applications can come to the committee and be dealt with in the way that you are saying that they should be dealt with. If we carry on this pass the parcel, behave in this pass the parcel way, I mean, you passed it to, so Councillor Mason referred it to Gas last time. I looked at that precedence. I saw that he made the decision. He, the cabinet maker, the cabinet decision maker. So I decided that rather than delay any further again and get on with dealing with these planning applications, that I was entitled to make the decision. So I made the decision. I think that's about it.
Councillor Smythe.
I was present at both of the occasions mentioned when Councillor Mason made a decision to increase the number to 3, and when Councillor Mason made the decision, Councillor Hunt made the decision obviously to increase it to 6. I think we are all aware that this is a very difficult balance for us. It's a balance between the need to get rid of the backlog, which we're all absolutely committed to.
Councillor Smythe,
I'm going to come back to the...
Are you going to come back to the actual issue?
Absolutely.
Because we're getting a bit sidetracked by the substance of the decision. We're not here to question the substance. I think there's certain things that are quite reasonable about the substance of the decision. That's not the point.
I'm meant to talk about the lack of information in making a decision. We did have a bit of information when making the decision under Councillor Hugh Mason, and I am sure, and I haven't had a chance to look back at the live stream, that I made a comment about needing to monitor this. Were there lots of the public who were feeling aggrieved? Were there lots of the times when the public would have expected us to hear it in front of the Planning Committee, and so on and so forth. And I do think that this report, upon which Councillor Hunt made a decision, did lack information about what the impact would be on the public and whether or not we knew anything about the public's attitudes. And I just wanted to bring that into the debate because I think that is relevant, and it is part of the fact that I don't think the report upon which Councillor Hunt made a public decision in front of Ryan and myself and the public about this, that there is enough information, and indeed I pointed that out during the course of that debate. I mean, I do think that one of the recommendations that may possibly come out of this piece of work is that we need a bit of information so we can monitor whether the public feel aggrieved, whether it makes a difference, what there is other authorities do. And some of the information that Councillor Hunt explained to us here isn't actually in here, in the report. It was explained to us verbally in the committee. So there's just that general point about the fact I don't think that we necessarily had adequate information for Councillor Hunt to make a decision on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can I just clarify? This decision was the one taken at a meeting of the Cabinet Member for Planning Policies and City Development, or was this one taken at the Planning Committee? This was taken at the Cabinet, yeah. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I keep forgetting your name, Councillor.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask Councillor Hunt, because I'm a bit confused by that. Was it your decision, or was it a planning committee decision?
No, we had the obviously pre-agendas, so none of these issues came up at the pre-agendas. Nobody queried anything. We were going ahead and making the decision, and it was my portfolio decision, public decision, make it a public decision.
Just to be clear, it wasn't a planning committee decision?
No, it wasn't a planning committee.
Councillor Peter Harris.
I believe Councillor Madden actually had his hand up first, so I'm quite happy to wait. Okay, fair enough. Councillor Hunt, I do feel mildly sorry for you to be in this position, to be honest, because I understand what you're trying to do with the backlog, so I understand that. Let's park that to one side, because we're here to talk about the process. What advice did you get beforehand, before making the decision?
I had all the information I needed to make the decision. Obviously, I get briefed. I'm fully aware, I told you I was fully aware of the decision that Councillor Hugh Mason had made and the way that he did it, and I'm fully aware that in the end he was the decision maker, as I will be. So, you know, it can be delayed, but it will ultimately come back to me to make the decision.
Just out of interest, I mean, you alluded to 3.2 in the report, and I think it's a good paragraph to actually discuss. Councillor Mason referred it back to governance and audit and standards. Did you not feel obliged to follow that lead, and why did you make a different decision?
Because of the precedent that he made the decision. So, you know, I could bounce it to gas, I'd be quite happy. If it goes to gas, fine. It's just more delay, isn't it? You know, and it will eventually come back to me. And if I don't make that decision again, we will go back to 1 year's wait in the planning backlog, and you lot will be jumping up and down saying, "What are you doing about this?" So, really and truly, this is a bit of a game at the moment, and it's important for those people who have their planning applications waiting, which you have all been telling me about, that you make a determination today that they should not have to wait any longer for up to a year.
One final, and then we'll go to Councillor
Just going to follow up on that point. It's two questions. So, firstly, obviously, do you understand that obviously these changes would effectively contribute to 42 members rather than the 3 that sits in the portfolio group? Would you agree that actually every single member of the council is affected by the changes being made?
I'm not clear about what the point you're trying to make. I understand that the scheme of delegation would change. As I said last time, Councillor Hugh Mason, on his own, made the decision, albeit it went to gas first of all. I'm sure he's aware of what they said. I actually am not aware of what they said, but I assume, well, you might well be, I assume they were in full agreement. So, so it's not the full council that would get to see it. In the end, it's the lead member that makes that decision.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hunt. I was just getting to the point of, obviously, I see that obviously changes to this scheme and delegation affects all members, not just members of the planning committee and the like, because obviously all residents across the city would be affected. That was the point I was making, but that's fine. I'm quite happy for someone else to ask a question.
We can come back to you if we need to, Councillor Bridges. Councillor Manager, could I ask a couple of points of clarification on the City Solicitor first? Is that all right? First of all, Councillor Hunt is saying that the decision went from Hugh Mason, in the earlier version of what happened, it went from Councillor Hugh Mason to Gask, but then Gask sent it back to Hugh Mason for the final decision. Is that correct in the process that you can remember?
I think that's practically what happened, yeah.
And can I ask about, in general, we were slightly having this conversation before the meeting, in terms of when we make minor constitutional changes that are sort of, if you like, potentially below the notice of full council, is it the normal process to go via GASC in doing that? And is that something that applies outside of just these planning committee decisions, or do we have other examples of that being done across the council?
When we do sort of constitutional changes, they tend to land with gas or ratification, and they're noted by full council, but they live with gas. We've done quite a raft of constitutional changes over the last couple of years. And alternative, they live with me, but my limited delegations, as part of the delegations from you at full council to me, are limited, quite rightly, because it takes away power from yourselves. So we've done quite substantive changes in gas to be noted by full council. Otherwise, we'd be in full council land every time we want to change the constitution to give it some workability, which is why it lives in that sort of ether. What I would say to you, Councillor Atkins, it's not actually clear, but it's a workable, pragmatic solution that we look to.
Thank you. Councillor Madden.
Yeah, could I just clarify a couple of things in relation to the meeting last year? That because I was a bit...
None of us may know, but if we do... Yeah.
Well, everybody else is doing it, so yeah. And the adequate is really what I'm talking about anyway in a minute. But when this item came up for the agenda, I did contact James, I think it was, to find out why it was on the agenda in the first place, because it seemed to me, from what I had been reading, was that cabinet members could make decisions in relation to how the work was operated. I didn't see a particular problem. So James, I talked it through, and James said, well, it's more for your views. So when it came, and I've written this down because I couldn't be bothered printing it off, the recommendation last year was that the gas be recommended that it be recommended that gas consider and make comments on the proposed amendments that the portfolio holder for planning and city development approves. Nothing saying agrees with or doesn't agree with. It's just, you know, if there's anything that you're not happy with, let me know. As it turned out, the committee in unison didn't have any problems at all with it. But that was only 57. That was the only bit referred to gas last year. 53 wasn't. Okay, 53 was a decision was already made up.
There is an opportunity to make full comments later if these aren't exactly questions.
Right. If you read, I'm back to it now.
Is there still a question?
What it is, I'm going to ask Councillor Hunt in a minute his reaction to this. When you look at the, is it a summary? I think it is. Dear City Solicitor, or whatever. There's a summary there on
the call-in request. So this is what was
page
submitted.
12.
Yes.
Our page 12.
Our page 12, yes. Well, my page 11 or page 12. Appendix 2.
Yeah, no, because it's the interpretation bit, and I can see where the call-in's coming from as well, but I also see Councillor Hunt's viewpoint. When we're talking about 57, this was felt to be a constitutional change. Now, I don't know what that means. Felt. I mean, it's a bit strange in a city council or a council anywhere for people to feel that it might be something. It either
constitutional laws not normally depend on feelings.
Well, yeah. I'm talking about this council, of course. You know, you don't feel it either it is or it isn't. And my interpretation is that it wasn't at the time, which is why I asked why it was on our agenda in the first place. Now, I was told, it was to seek out, see if there's any particular problems with it. The one thing we did confirm, which I thought was more important than gas actually, was that it had gone to the planning committee, and the planning committee members had agreed it then. I don't know, Councillor Hunt, if you can tell me in a minute whether the planning committee were consulted on this occasion. But it seemed to me, it just seemed to me then, it was unanimous anyway. Members didn't have any question at all, thought it was something that needed to be done. Nobody said they were unhappy with it. I think there were 5 out of the 6 members there, cross-party, when we discussed it last year. But it didn't seem to me, and I don't know what your reading of that is, whether that Councillor Mason, I suspect, and I haven't got the minutes in front of me, that there was not a recommendation on Councillor Mason's bit of paper to say this has to go to gas. I think because people felt it. I don't know how you feel constitutional.
The recommendation that came out of Councillor Mason's meeting was?
It came out of it, but it was an add-on, I think.
Okay.
That's what I mean. I
do feel we're in the realm of comment here. Do you have a way?
That's why I'm asking the question. Yeah, I'm there. Right? When you read this, Councillor Hunt, did you feel that there was a need to refer this on to gas? Or were you happy that you had, on the advice that you got, delegated authority to decide on paragraph 57?
Yeah, so I was aware of all these issues. I was aware of it being to gas, as we've said a couple of times already, and I looked at that, and I felt that I had all the information, adequate information, to make the decision. This here today is about a constitutional issue. It is not about anything else, or a constitutional debate or argument. It's not about anything else. I looked at all the information that I had in my briefings, and the other councillors had raised with me. No one raised a constitutional issue with me at all, not one. But subsequent to my decision, which I felt entitled to make for every good reason, not least the 1-year backlog and people waiting for their planning applications to be heard, which members have been complaining about non-stop for a very long time, and with good reason, I felt it was absolutely right to get on with the decision as quickly as is possible. I looked at what had happened before, and I saw it was not the full council that made the decision. It was not gas that made the decision, but the portfolio holder that made the decision. So I made the decision, and I think I made it properly and proportionately and reasonably in the interests of people who needed to have their planning applications heard, who had been waiting far too long, and who have been emailing members and the MPs and everybody else asking for their planning applications to be heard. Where was their planning application and why isn't it coming up? The other question about the planning committees, no, I didn't consult the planning committee. I wasn't aware actually that the planning committee had been consulted before, so that's something that is new to me. Nevertheless, I believe the planning, I can believe what I like, aren't I? In a way you can believe what you feel. But the crucial matter here is people out there who are waiting a year for their planning application to be heard. That is not right, and we need to get on as a council, and constitutional issues are interesting, of course, but we need to make decisions that improve the planning backlog in the best interests of all of those people. As I said to you, I am also mindful of which was argued by Councillor Brent, and very mindful of the rights of people to bring, three of them to bring a matter to the planning committee. But in a way, that has not altered, because one member can still do that. If it comes out on MIS and they see it, they can refer it to the planning committee. I would implore them not to do it just for the sake of it now, just to bugger us up, as it were, because we need to get on and deal with these planning applications. There are some very big ones there, and there's some very important ones, and people have been waiting a long time and losing money whilst they're waiting. You know, there you are, that's about it. That's what I consider to be the most important thing to do. Some of you seem to think that the constitutional argument is more important than that, but I don't think people out there will necessarily agree with you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Sorry, can you remind me of your name, Councillor
Mark Jeffrey?
Jeffrey. Councillor Jeffrey, you had a question.
No, I didn't.
No, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Prater Harris.
Thank you.
I do have questions of my own, but I'm not.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that.
Fill your boot.
Councillor Hunt, I just want to make the point that we're not here to talk about the backlog. I mean, that is an issue for you and your portfolio. We're actually here to talk about the process of how the decision was made, and that's the fundamentals of what we're doing. It's not about what is going on in your portfolio. It's more about the process that we're being made. I just want you to understand that, because while we have this is a constitutional issue, and actually it probably makes sense of why we have a constitutional working group at the moment to flush these sorts of issues out. But do you understand that's what we're talking about? We're not discussing the actual decision. We're discussing the process of how you made that decision, on what information.
I think I've said already 4 or 5 times that I looked at how the decision was made before. I'm aware that this is a constitutional issue. I've made that very clear. But I also, at the same time, would ask you to look at the perception that this causes amongst the people who are waiting for their planning applications to be determined. The reason that we are here is that I made a decision to halve the queue, or the wait, which is what you have all been asking us to do, and now you want to tie us up in red tape and bureaucracy because you've got the answer that you wanted. Now, if you had not called it in, we wouldn't be sat here today. People would be getting their planning applications heard, and because you've called it in, I understand why, but the other side of the coin is that you wanted this decision to be made. The money is not there to do it, so the only other alternative is what I did. But if you want to refer it to gas and then come back to me in 5-6 weeks' time to look at it again, I would have no alternative but to make the same decision. And anybody who doesn't come to that view is asking people to wait a year for their planning applications.
Just for clarity, Chair, obviously I don't know if you're addressing me, Councillor, but I haven't called any decision in. I'm here as a member of the panel. I think you might have been directing that towards Councillor Brent rather than myself.
The 5 members that called it in. I mean, this is becoming a bit of a game this afternoon, a bit of a kickabout, which I regret, because people are waiting for their planning applications to be determined, and red tape and bureaucracy is now holding up their planning applications.
And with the greatest respect, I understand what you're saying, but the relevance here, we're talking about the process. We're not talking about your portfolio. That is down to you, as I've already said. We're talking about the process of how it was made and the relation to the Constitution. And I have 15.2 of the constitutional change in front of me, and it does make reference to the fact that any change to the Constitution, including changes to standing orders and the conduct of council business, shall be submitted to full council for approval, which I think the Solicitor Peter Balfour made reference to earlier about us taking it to full council for noting. That is in our standard procedure. I think you've made some points about whether that's right or wrong. You know, and I fully...
Question, Peter.
No, this is what I just said. Would that be something that you would recommend for a constitutional working group?
Councillor Mason made the decision last time. It was noted at the council. I made the decision this time. It would be noted at the council. There is no other delay. There's no other reason he made the decision, not the council. Councillor Mason made the decision. I've said it numerous times. I'm making the decision this time, which is my role. And I made it with all the adequate information, and I want to get on with it so that those people that we are all concerned about, who are waiting for their planning applications to be determined, do not have to wait for a year.
No, I understand that, Councillor Hunt, and I think you've made reference to the Councillor Mason decision, and I'm glad you have, because the Councillor Mason decision was made in November, wasn't it, the 19th of November? Is that correct? Have I got that right from the report? No, that's fine.
Councillor House, can you address?
No, I am. I'm addressing Councillor Hunt. I'm asking you if he's correct.
I'm just getting a little bit of a back.
No, if that is correct, can you just see if that is correct, the decision that Councillor made was on the 19th of November?
Yes, Councillor Hunt. You think it was a correct decision of Councillor Mason's at the time to refer?
Yes, he made the correct decision when he made it.
So on the 19th of November, he made the correct decision.
Well, if you've got the report in front of you...
to avoid this turning into...
No, it's a point I'm going to make, because on the 16th of December...
We're not making points, we're asking questions.
No, on the 16th of December, did Councillor Mason make the right decision when he sent it to Governance and Audit?
I don't think that's asked and answered.
That was a decision that he made. I was aware of that decision, and I'm also aware that it subsequently came back to him. Now, I could have done that, and then we would have had yet more delay. But instead it's been...
thank you, that's enough, I've got one.
Peter, in terms of, can I just clarify, so Councillor Hunt says that after he's made this decision, so this decision was made July, was it, of this year, was it going to come to full council to be noted at some point? Do we know if it was? And was Councillor Hugh Mason's previous similar decision that went via GAST later noted by council, or did it just go into effect? I wasn't sure.
The former one just went into effect. The one with regard to Councillor Hunt doesn't have to, no.
No, so actually it isn't the case that it was going to go to full council, I didn't think.
Okay, that's even better then.
I want to try and wind down, sort of depoliticise this a little bit. Councillor Healy, I guess you'll probably be quite good at that. So do you want to ask a question? To me, this is a very dry constitutional issue that I want to focus in on. But if you want to ask a question first, Councillor Healy, then I might ask one.
I do want to ask a question. I've been listening very carefully to what Councillor Hunt's been saying because I'm wanting to understand how and why he acted in the way he did. And I think I understand. Yeah, and I'm also listening to the objectors who've brought this for review. I'd just like to ask outside one question. How far do you think it's the role of the Cabinet members to make decisions about the process and procedures and rules of the Council? Is it their responsibility, mainly, or not? What's your view on that?
Well, it's all ambiguous, isn't it? I think that even I hope you won't mind me saying, but even his report is a bit ambiguous. The conversation today around it all is rather ambiguous. I felt that I was entitled to make the decision, so I made the decision. We operate cabinet-style government here. I wish we didn't. I wish we had committee-style government, and then things probably would be better. But as I say, I cannot stress enough, to me, the urgency and the importance was in getting the planning applications determined. That is what I've been hearing members wanted for months and months and months. So with all that in my mind, not just the report, but with everything around, the environment of the discussion, the narrative of the discussion, the lack of any representation from any member about a constitutional issue, is not me disregarding the Constitution, but I looked at who made the decision previously, and it was Councillor Mason. So when you bring all those things together, I balanced it up and decided that I should make the decision. As I say, we wouldn't be here today if it had not been called in, and those people who are waiting would be having their planning applications determined quicker.
I do have a second question. Given that this was going to impacting the way the planning committee operated and planning committee members. Did you consider at any stage consulting either the chair or members of the planning committee about what you were proposing to do in advance of your decision?
I didn't know. I think I was comforted by the fact that the chair of the planning committee was also my opposition spokesperson on city planning and development, so was aware, and in fact she will be aware of the representations that she made to me, and with great respect, went a bit further than I was prepared to go. So I hope she might mind me saying that, and I hope that we don't have to go down that track anyway, because I hope members will be reasonable, and if this goes off to gas and it comes back to me and a decision is made, I say I don't see any alternative but to make the same decision. So it's all a bit crazy this afternoon.
Yeah, Councillor Smith, since you mentioned.
This is another question slightly related to that. The report that we received, which is on page 23, does indicate that the 48% of the cases waiting committee consideration are because one member of the council wants them discussed, and they are taking us an inordinate length of time. We've already spent 2 planning committees solely doing HMOs, and we're about to do another one tomorrow. I did make an alternative suggestion to that, and I wonder, this is the bit at which I wonder if you had thought that the relative independence of GASC and the cross-party nature of GASC would have been a better place to have discussed this report and to have considered that position where we, in fact, alter the number of members that would need to look at a planning permission and call it to the committee, particularly in the light of this precedent we have at the moment, which is a single member of the committee. Public knowledge, it's on every planning report. Gerald Van Jackson brings all of these to the committee, and that would make an enormously significant change if we, and which is what I suggested, increase the numbers. And I would have thought, had you not considered that you might get a better and clearer decision which would have broken the backlog significantly by asking GASC to have a look at it?
So I have to, with greatest respect, address that particular statement, because I was the chair of the planning committee when it was decided by the committee, not Councillor Vernon Jackson on his own, but by the whole of the committee. It is just that his name is on there because someone had to do it. So it was the whole of the committee. He asked them if that is what they wanted to do. I was the chairman at the time, and that was the decision that was made. So that's that one. Well, greatest respect, again, you were the chair of the planning committee. I received no request. I received no request to take this decision, which I feel entitled to make, in order to halve the backlog. That is my responsibility. I am the city development and portfolio holder. I am very happy to be scrutinised in this decision, and I welcome all scrutiny. We must not forget that we had the pre-agendas, several of them. None of this was brought up at the pre-agendas. I was not asked about any constitutional matters at the pre-agendas, or indeed at the decision meeting. It looks like some people have gone away and looked at it and thought, well, how can we delay this even more? That's how it looks, I'm sorry. That's how it looks to me, at least. And bog the planning department down in even further delay, because that is what this amounts to today, bogging the planning department down in further delay.
If you don't mind, Councillor, I'm stepping that one, because I think that's slightly, if in a way, almost by taking that approach, to me, you are slightly making the point the call-in makes, which is that the inadequate information for me, or the information you didn't fully consider is the reasoning why some members might have a problem with you making this decision on your own from a constitutional standpoint. So what I'm saying is, what I'm going to ask you is, do you understand the reason, and do you feel like you were given information on the reason why normally these matters do go to GASC? What is your understanding of why this would normally go to GASC and not be made by the portfolio holder on their own?
It's ambiguous about whether or not this goes to GASC normally.
Yeah, but given that it has often...
I mean, this seems to be making policy or constitution up on the hoof. I mean, if that is what people want in future, by all means do that. But I had all the information that I needed at the time to make a sensible, reasonable and proportionate decision. I made it over and over again. I've said today, I was very well aware of the 3.2 in the report, which clearly members here were not aware of because they said it wasn't there when it is there. So I had all the information that I needed, and if that is the issue at stake today, then as I say, I made the decision properly, proportionately and sensibly in order to reduce the backlog by a half. And now we seem to be bogged down in red tape and bureaucracy.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, I just wanted to check because my understanding is it's the portfolio holder that makes a decision, not allegation that it normally goes to GAS when actually that doesn't happen. Last time in 2021 it was Councillor Hugh Mason as the then cabinet member who made a decision to do something. Is that correct?
Yes, he decided that route. I looked at the route that he had chosen and I saw that he made the decision subsequently. So I made the decision at my portfolio meeting.
What is your understanding, Councillor Hunt, of why Councillor Mason might have sent his decision to GAS at the time that he did, and why constitutional matters often go through GASC?
I think I said just now that this is a matter of urgency. I've had members jumping up and down telling us that our planning department is not fit for purpose. We had it from over there by the MP. We had a whole host of members, particularly on that side of the chamber, telling us we should get on with dealing with these planning applications. We should get this backlog down. Well, that's what we've done. If you let me... Yeah, I know you're not getting the answer that you would like. I'm explaining...
I'm asking you to talk about the constitutional issue. The city solicitor has accepted that... So Chapter 4, the role of the council, is annexed to our report.
Because Councillor Mason did it, didn't mean to say that I had to do it. It came back to him and he made his decision.
I'm asking you if the evidence, that the information you received gave you an adequate understanding of why...
Yes, I've said that over and over again.
What is your understanding of why Councillor Mason...
I don't know why he sent it there. As his decision, he made his decision based on the information that he had. I based my decision on the information that I had, and indeed on everything else that you have all been telling me for months and months and throughout the year, that we need to get the backlog down. And now we're backlogging it even further, as it were.
In the report that we have today, the Chapter 4 of the Constitution that's attached, it says at paragraph 3, so under 4.1 paragraph 3, unless otherwise provided, appointments, powers, duties, composition of cabinets, panels and committees, these are matters reserved to City Council. Where in the Constitution does it say that the portfolio holder, the cabinet member, is entitled to make changes to the standing orders of one of the committees, when it says here that power is reserved to full council? So where in the Constitution does it say the cabinet member makes that decision?
So the cabinet made the decision last time without any problem.
So you were acting
on
the
there was the
previous
precedent. The recent precedent, which raised no opposition in the council at all, when Councillor Hugh Mason made his decision, it raised no opposition in the council. And so that precedent was set.
But in the previous precedent, Councillor Mason sent his decision first via gas. You've accepted that. But you also say you don't know why he did that. So that was not a piece of information you'd been given in the report, why he might have made that decision.
So the precedent was set that the portfolio holder made the decision.
After consideration by gas.
I get that, but he made the decision. He was entitled to make the decision. So I looked at that, and I looked at the pressure that everybody was under, including the planning department, the money that was being wasted, the amount of people who were waiting for their planning applications to be determined. I took all of this evidence into account, not just what's written in the reports. I took all of that into account in the full knowledge of what had happened before and made my decision. That's where it is now.
Councillor Jeffrey?
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to point out that it was two separate people making two separate decisions in two separate years. I think that's a sort of a fact of the matter.
Again, that's kind of a comment around the question. Go ahead, Councillor.
In fact, it's a helpful point. The urgency back was not so great as it was recently, with COVID hitting in, the nitrates issue and so on. So the urgency has increased quite a lot, and people waiting for a year to have their planning, as members have said, from mainly that side of the chamber, have said this is unacceptable. I agree it's unacceptable, but now the same group are tying us down in red tape. That's how it looks to me, red tape and bureaucracy, because it didn't have to be called in. This decision could have been made in the best interests of all those people waiting for their planning application.
Councillor, so essentially what you say, I mean, you're an experienced councillor, you're aware that constitutional matters often go via gas. I don't think anybody is doubting that. But you're saying that the expediency of the speed and the importance led you at this point to decide, actually, I'm going to circumvent that process and make the decision myself, essentially.
No. I looked at what had happened and I saw that despite it going to gas, the portfolio holder made the decision. So I, as a portfolio holder, made a proportionate and reasonable decision in the best interest of getting the backlog down and without further waiting, red tape and bureaucracy, if you like. So that's what I did. And I still believe that's the right decision. You can send it to gas, and when it comes back to me, I will look at all the evidence again and very likely have to come to the same decision because I need to get that backlog down. Now, we can keep on going round the houses like this. The point is, people out there they don't care which committee it is, they don't care which part of the council it is, they don't care which councillor it is. They want the planning backlog to come down so they can have their planning applications heard.
But the point, to some degree, is that in your own words, as you just said, you consider some of this process red tape that's delaying the decision, and you've also said that no one raised a constitutional issue with you. So is it not fair to say that constitutional issues were not at the forefront of your mind when making this decision?
Very much at the forefront of my mind. I looked at what Councillor Hugh Mason had done, and I saw it had no effect. It essentially was a period of waiting that was unnecessary when people are trying to get their planning applications determined and officers want to get on with their job. So, no, I did look at it, and I was very aware of the constitutional matters issues. But which is more important, people having their planning applications determined, or of the council saying that this should be got on with, or referring it to gas and then waiting even longer when we really need to get those the backlog down. That's the most important. That is the most important thing, quite frankly. Yes.
Thank you. I think that's fairly clear. Councillor Madden.
I have thanks to Councillor Stuart Brown here. I've got the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of November 2020. This, of course, is after the gas meeting when the cabinet member made the decision.
So this is the meeting of the cabinet member.
This is the meeting of the cabinet member. Judith was the only one to tell
on which date? Sorry.
November 21. November 21, okay. And the second recommendation, the 1 to 3 is the recommendation 1. And then the second recommendation is the other one, about 50, 54 and 57. There is nothing in either recommendation which says refer to gas or refer to the full council, which is what should have happened. So what I'm just making this point, what Councillor Hunt is saying is correct. It was a precedent set by Councillor, as an afterthought as I thought it was, and I don't know if Mr McGuire has been saying that, but it seems to me there was no instruction to refer to council or gas. It's something he did off his back. It was felt. That's what it says, that it was constitutional matter.
Councillor Madden, just to clarify, isn't that exactly the point that the call-in is making, that should have been in the report? That the recommendation should have been, and in fact, I would argue it just didn't explicitly say so in this report that was actually presented to Councillor Hunt. It doesn't explicitly say, refer this to gas, but it does contain that implication. But it should have explicitly said, I think, given the context, refer it to gas to consider these changes. And then they would have come back, as they did with Councillor Mason, it had been decided, and we'd have all left alone. Isn't that exactly the thing that we're saying should have been in it?
So I talked to the officers about this in the briefings. We had many of them, lots of conversations about how we're going to get it. And this came up, and the view was that I was entitled to make the decision, as Councillor Mason had done before. Now look, if he's appearing here that there is an issue around the Constitution, and as a committee you feel that this needs to be looked at, by all means refer it and say that in future a change like this has to go to full council, which is what the solicitors does not want. And we can sit here about arguing about the Constitution all the time in the council. We'll have dozens of different ways of doing it, or we can make sensible and pragmatic decisions about getting the planning backlog down, which is the people out there, as I say, they don't care which committee makes it, which committee talks about it, they want it brought down. And I thought that's what members wanted, which was to bring the backlog down and not delay it further. So that's why we've moved in the way that we have.
Chair, I'm not sure we're getting anywhere. No. Well,
I think it's because we can't yet move to comments. So I think.
Can I just say that nobody wants to stop what's happening, I assume, because there is a backlog.
I think that's
correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's the one point. We have a constitutional working party which has been set up with consultants, right? Yeah. Which can look at these things, and if people are happy with that, we could say, let's have a fresh look at this, because a decision was taken last year, a decision's been taken this year. The decision was taken in July. Councillor Hunt's quite right. There could have been a lot more cases dealt with in the meantime. But could we note that it's something that needs to be looked at, but rather than Councillor Hunt have to call together or have a meeting, and that takes time, again, for us to say proceed anywhere with the decisions that we make.
Well, that's an interesting thing to consider. I think that's a comment. So let's finish the process we said we would follow off. So I will move to Councillor Brent to sum up, then Councillor Hunt to sum up, and then we can move the panel to comment if we are happy to end questions there. I think we have got as far as we can get.
That was
questions.
just for Councillor.
Yeah. So Councillor Brent, would you like to sum up briefly if possible, then we'll move to Councillor Hunt to briefly sum up.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the calling will stand as it is. I'm just going to address a couple of worrying points that were made and inaccuracies, I think, which is important, and keep it on the matter as well as just to address some of the partial accusations that I think potentially were made. So I think it's worrying that the Cabinet member says he feels entitled to make the decision that he made. And I'd say there's only one thing I potentially didn't disagree with, was that the public don't care what committee decides. I totally agree with that. The public don't care what committee decides, but as elected members we should respect the process, we should follow the process, and if there is a constitutional change in our constitution says, and it impacts more members than just the member making the decision, then actually if it's a process to follow, it's a process that we should follow. It's not adding any extra red tape. I'm worried, I really am worried about the rhetoric and the perception that you were spinning to, especially the member of the press here, is there is no guarantee you would cut the backlog by half. And I know that's a point not about this, but it is not. So if you looked at the numbers, actually, there isn't a breakdown or a differentiation. There's a breakdown of 3 or more. There's not a differentiation of what that would be, whether it would be 4, 5 or 6. So that is inaccurate. Interesting, the first thing you said, I'm going to prove you wrong, and actually what you did is prove yourself wrong by saying that you've proved me wrong, is that, yes, you said the Governance and Audit Committee is cited in that first paragraph, but actually that wasn't what I said. The statement of fact that the Governance and Audit and Standards Committee was cited is in the report. I totally agree with that. What's not in there is the explicit legal implication that occurred in the previous decision, and that's what this call-in is stating. Just a few other issues, Chair. More than happy to talk to the press about the perception of the Conservative group's policy on this decision. But the worrying thing, so the comments that the Cabinet member made, that gas, not fully aware what they said. This is a quote that I've written down. Wasn't aware the Planning Committee was consulted. In the end, it was the previous Cabinet member's decision. Agreed. In the end, it was, because the process had to be followed. And like you said, a precedent was set. There is a constitutional working group, which I think would be good for everyone. The aspiration is obviously to reduce the backlog. I'm just worried with some of the things that have been said from more of a political point, because you also said the backlog is almost cleared, but then just in the second verse said that actually, if we don't make this decision, there'll be an extra year to wait. And the last point that I'm going to make, Chair, would be there was a second option. So, and I just think that's important for the press to understand. The second option, there was a second option. This was not the only option. So if the Cabinet member decides that this comes back and he makes the same decision, he does have a second option, and that would be to increase the frequency of the Planning Committee. Yes, which does involve money. So the decision that you made is arguably showing the Liberal Democrats administrations want to reduce the backlog financially. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Brent, I'm so sorry. I'm not looking for argument this afternoon at all. I'm looking to get to a decision which supports the halving of the backlog. But I'm afraid I'm really sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but you couldn't have been listening. When I referred to the backlog being cleared, we were talking about the period between January and May. Well, and I was very explicit on this, where the officers focused entirely on the delegated decisions. So that is almost cleared. But you're wrong again when you say there's no numbers. I'm sorry, but you are on page 42 of my report. You got it wrong earlier at 3.2. You've got it wrong now where it says 4.15. Members can note there are currently 51 cases awaiting committee consideration due to objections. If the threshold of adverse representations required to require committee consideration was raised from 3 to 4, reduced by 10, and if it raised from 3 to 6, this would nearly halve. It's there. Either you've forgotten or you haven't read it. And reducing it down to 24, which is about half the number right now. As for the politics, I've not been political today, but I'm very sorry, but you're the one that brought it all up, not me. I've very carefully tried to avoid that because I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in reducing the backlog, which you have all been asking me to do. Now, I'm not interested in the politics of this. I don't think anybody out there is interested in any politics. There's no politics as far as I can see. It's not our fault that the nitrates issue came up. It's not your fault or anybody else's fault that the nitrates issue came up. It's not anybody's fault that COVID came along and held it all up. But we are all obliged to get our heads together to try and serve the people of Portsmouth and getting this planning backlog down. Now, by all means, put hurdles and try and trip us up or whatever. I'm just not interested in it. I'm interested in doing the right thing for the people that you have all been telling me are waiting for their planning applications to be heard. That's all I'm interested in. And I say here calmly and quietly, just try to answer your questions And we've gone round the houses quite a few times. So I have corrected some of the things that you've said. I corrected them respectfully and kindly. At 4.15, it says on page 42 of the original report that if it's raised from 3 to 6, that would nearly halve, reduce the budget. So I have got the information, despite everything that you say. All the information is there. The officers submitted a good report. We could all make these decisions on this report. So I have answered it. So in short, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for getting me along today to air this matter. I really hope that you don't decide now to refer it on somewhere else, because I don't think that's a wise thing to do. Certainly I'll be standing up in the cabinet, in the council then, and would say that you've delayed it even further, which is a fact. So I hope very much the committee will decide that I did have that adequate information. I've explained to you that I felt I had adequate, that I did have, not felt, I did have adequate information, and I made the decision in full knowledge of the previous gas hearing and the decision that Councillor Mason made, and took into account what all members have been saying to me, that they want the planning backlog reduced. And here we are, hopefully today, allowing it to reduce by half.
Thank you. Now invite comment from the panel. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you. I wanted to build on what Councillor Madden said, what Leo said, which is that we need to move on from this. I would be quite happy to accept a compromise whereby we take this matter to the Constitutional Working Party in some way, but don't necessarily hold up the decision on this particular issue. I think that's an important point. I am working flat out as chair of the Planning Committee to help us to reduce the backlog, and I don't want that to be delayed any. Second point is, I was very interested in Councillor Hunt's response to my suggestion that we should do more to reduce the backlog by looking at the number of elected members that have to be involved. In fact, what he said was that when Councillor Van Jackson put his name to objecting to wanting a call-in for all HMOs, he was doing it on behalf of others. So, if so, it should have a bunch of 3 or 4 names against it, not just Councillor Van Jackson, I would suggest. If not, then I do think the right of individual members to call things in does open up the Planning Committee to a charge of being more party political than it should be, and I would like to ask Councillor Hunt to consider that again, because if it's the case it's more than one person there, then let's have it said it's more than one, and that is a democratic way of doing it, but having it at the moment it appears that one person is holding up a terrific number of applications and a terrific amount of time is being wasted that could be. So I would ask you to consider that one again in the light of that confirmation you gave. And third of all, I think in future, I don't want to see a continued every time we get in a problem, we increase the number of members of the public's representations that we take as a threshold. I do think there's a material difference between 3 and 6, and I think it's interesting that Councillor Mason chose to take it to GASC first, and then he made a decision, and I think that probably was, I hope that's the decision that the Constitution Working Party comes to, but I won't preempt that. But I do think that actually it would be good, and had I been making that decision, I'd have wanted to know more about public perception and experience of this policy, which we don't have in front of us. We have a lot of other information, and I absolutely take that point, but we don't really know what the public think about this, or what the public, whether they feel it's a lessening of their rights, or whether it's cutting back or increasing the number of representations. It might be a longer piece of work that's needed, but I don't have any perception about how the public are taking this change, and I don't want to see it just automatically ratcheting up by enabling that to happen, because there's a vast difference between 3 and 6 and between 6 and 12 and so forth. So subject to those 3 things, I would suggest we, just to propose that we do move to a decision to learn from this, refer it to the Constitution Working Party, and have another look at that particular clause that's described under paragraph 4.6 in this report, in case we can speed it up further. Again, if it's more than one councillor who's wanting it to go back to committee, then let's have it. But that's not my perception I get from planning committees at the moment.
I think there's a couple of different recommendations there. There's essentially, in terms of what we're asked to do today, my reading of the Constitution is not that we can refer it straight to GASC. I believe we either have to say we are accepting the Cabinet member's decision, or we are referring it back to him with reasons for him to reconsider, which may include, we think you should send this decision via GASC. So one proposal I think you're making is we accept his decision, but we ask the Constitutional Working Group to look at this. But you are actually also asking alongside that a separate decision would be referred back to the Cabinet member to ask him to re-look at. So that's actually a separate. You want him to look at not at sending it to GASC, but at increasing the number of members.
It's an entirely separate decision.
That I just want to clarify at this point. I will come to you, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Puds. But first of all, would it be open to us to refer back to the Cabinet member on that substantive ground that we think he should have had more information? I don't think we can.
It goes back to him, to lead, Councillor Hunt, with your views as to the position. It's not about re-looking it. He either makes that decision again or he doesn't.
Okay, so he could reconsider that if we refer us. So you're asking if we do refer back to him for him to reconsider that. Just on the point, you might be able to help us here, Ian. Sorry if this is already in your report or if there's something I should probably know. Have we already eliminated the ability for sort of a neighbour, someone who's directly affected, to call it to the committee in our procedures?
So the current constitution requires 3 objections, so 3 neighbours can come together.
3 neighbours of people.
They don't need to be neighbours. 3 people from Outer Hebrides could write in.
But in some places, am I right that one affected person can? Or
so your previous process, the one that Councillor Mason changed in the last alteration, changed it from 1 person as long as they made a deputation was able to bring it to committee. We got rid of that obligation to make them drag themselves in here to speak to you, and it's now 3 people, anybody, even without deputation.
I think I'm talking about statutory consultees. There's no priority given to people you have to consult.
So there's a say distinguishing statutory consultees. Statutory consultees are bodies, quangos, etc., set up to provide advice to the council, or indeed parts of the council, like the local highway authority, who are defined as statutory consultees. Separate issue within the
That's
constitution.
not what I meant. I meant, so like if you're an immediate next door neighbour applying, you have to be notified of the application, don't you? But they don't have any priority.
Again, not quite, but no, there is no waiting to give one resident's opinion greater than another.
So sorry, because I do think, so one of the points that I think is somewhat constitutional in what Councillor Smythe just said, and you can agree with me or not, Peter, is that in paragraph 15 of the Constitution, it does talk about when changes are being made to the Constitution, Cabinet members finding adequate means to consult members of the public on the changes. And it is the case, isn't it, that we have not consulted the public on any of these changes?
That is correct. I think the councillor makes a very good point about the nature of engagement with the public. I think that, as she rightly points out, is something for the Constitutional Working Group to look at, because it isn't as transparent as it should be, and perhaps it should be reviewed, and I agree with that, as a matter of principle and probably in law. Thank you.
And just finally, because this isn't, I don't think, in the report, it immediately occurred to me if we raised the threshold from 3 to 6, did you consider the possibility that the reason we get people coming in as a 3 at the moment is because that is the standard, and so a certain number of them will find 6, and so you might not get a full reduction. When you did that math, did you consider the possibility that because it's the threshold, that's how many you get, whereas if you raise it to 6, you will still find, in some cases, they find 6 objectives?
Indeed, it was a point made verbally from my recollection. In either the briefing or the meeting, we effectively did 3 briefings on this one, so it's hard to recall. The figures in the report are they are illustrative on an existing backlog number, so it's very unlikely for someone to come to look at and drum up 3 more objections from having 3 now. It doesn't really happen in truth. Going forward, yes, absolutely, behaviour would change. That wouldn't be a surprise to me, but that would be part of the ongoing monitoring.
So the cut numbers are an estimate, but they're a reasonable estimate. Comments further then, Councillor Peter-Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I've unfortunately sat in your position before as the Chair of the Scrutiny Management Panel, and the panel has 2 options effectively that we take. We either resolve to take no action and endorse the original decision, or we refer the matter back to the decision-making body with a recommendation. For example, it has to go to governance and audit. There is no in-between. That is what we have to do now. So it's incumbent on members. So I just wasn't sure what you meant, Councillor Smythe, and that's why I was going to ask, because we either take no action and do nothing and endorse the original decision, or we do send it back with a recommendation that has to go to governance and audit standards.
Because of the urgency of this, I was proposing that we took no action, but that we did take it upon ourselves and pass it on to whoever had to, that it should be part of the Constitution review.
Yeah, I agree with the Constitutional Working Group element, but that is not for us to make that decision here today. We have 2 options, and I've got the briefing note in front of me from when I was chairing this, because I thought it would be quite. I'm just a bit sad, really. I keep stuff. Councillor Heaney smiles because he probably does the same. But that's the matter of what we're doing. So we can't. If we take no action, we take no action. There's no. We're going to send it to Constitutional Working. We're going to do it anyway. I believe. I think that's going to come out of this. Or we revert back to the cabinet member. I mean, I'm quite happy to have a steer. I mean, personally, I say I'm not happy to have a steer. Actually, personally, we have processes to follow in this council, and the process is quite. In my view, the Constitution is Constitution. I think once you make a decision that affects the Constitution, we have to follow the correct process. In this instance, I think Councillor Hunt has been pragmatic, although he hasn't followed the correct process. Now, I don't blame him for that. I don't think he's particularly at fault. I just don't particularly believe he's been very well advised. So I'm going to propose that we send it back to Councillor Hunt with the caveat that it can go to governance and audit standards as part of the new report. Because the report that goes back will not be the same. It will be a different report with different recommendations slightly and different information.
I think we do. I mean, I will deal with that.
I couldn't hear the question because the mic wasn't.
So sorry, we're out of questions. Actually, Councillor Hans, we're into comment.
I was asking the question of whether we have the basis of 2 proposals we could vote on, and I would like, if I've got a seconder for my proposal,
we'll come to that.
And I'm talking about the first proposal. The other one I recognise isn't within the power of
I'd like everyone to have the chance to make comment first before we go to voting on proposals. I have Councillor Madden, then Councillor Heaney, then Councillor Jeffrey, so Councillor Madden, and then Councillor Brown. So if you want to second either of the proposals on the table, so we do have proposal 1, which is to essentially say, because of the urgency of the nature of the issue, we are not going to refer it back to the Cabinet member, but we will make some comment, most likely, including a recommendation that this issue be referred to the Constitutional Working Group. We have a second proposal, and the comment would have no meaning. The second proposal is from Councillor Peter-Harris, which is we do refer back to the Cabinet member with the reason that we believe that he should have followed the existing precedent for constitutional changes and referred the decision to GASC before he took the final decision on it, and that the report didn't make it adequately clear to him, or he didn't acquire adequate understanding from discussions as to why that was of a sufficient level of importance despite the urgency. So I think those are the 2 recommendations. If either wants to...
Chair,
I think it's a fine line, but...
I think, Chair, if I may, could we have a compromise? Because I think there is a need for this to go to gas.
I had my hand up before.
Yeah,
but there is a need for this to go to gas. And there is gas on Thursday, and there is an opening slot for it already on the agenda.
I think that's getting a little deep into it. A lot of people make their comment first, then we'll vote on things. So let's, it's Councillor Madden first. Sorry, you're actually at the end of the list, Councillor Jeffrey. Just Madden, then Heaney, then Jeffrey, then Brown. Yeah.
I was going to move, but I will now second the proposal from Councillor Smythe. There is some confusion as to what should or should not have been advised to members, which is the basis of the complaint, and I think Councillor Peter Harris used a very good word in relation to Councillor Hudson's decision. It was pragmatic. And I think that's I think that's right, right? And there is a governance in order on Thursday, but it hasn't got a paper on this. And so it's only more delay. That's really what will happen. If we refer it back to the cabinet member's got to have another meeting. He's got at least 7 days notice and all the times involved in it. And I think, there is that. I know the thing was about adequate information, but there is the concern about backlogs of planning applications. So I'm happy to support or to second Councillor Smythe's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Heaney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I think at the heart of this issue really goes back to how far Cabinet members should have the right to make decisions about procedure and rules that we run our business by. That's what I think is at the heart of this. And there clearly is a bit of a lack of clarity about how and when that happens. And, as in all, there's a lot of situations, we tend to muddle through a bit in terms of what we do. I quite understand why we don't take things to full council every time, because it would be potentially quite time-consuming and also quite restrictive in that you only have a certain number of council meetings each year to do these matters. And sometimes using the Gas Committee is obviously the better way of doing it. And I think we should think about that. I also think that Councillor Hunt made his decision with the best of intentions. He made a decision in order to deal with a problem. The problem you get into sometimes is that if you think about the executive member making a decision, to what extent should executive members make decisions to solve problems, and to what extent does that then enhance their ability and power, but also disenfranchise others who don't get the chance to have a say on the decision. So I think it's about getting that balance right. I think this is what we're trying to get to here. So I think it is worth the Constitutional Working Party having a look at this, because I think it has raised some interesting issues about to what extent Cabinet members can make decisions, when they should consult, maybe who they should consult. I mean, we can't nail every detail down on these things, but we want a set of principles that should operate when there are rule changes so that it's clear and so people have the opportunity to have a say. And we can think about examples like this and think about, well, how would we develop a set of principles that could apply across a range of areas. So having a look at the procedure note that we've got attached to this, it did basically say there were three options: to refer back to the Cabinet, to take no action, the Cabinet member's decision will stand, refer back to the Cabinet member for further consideration, which would mean another meeting, as has been said, and it says, or, as a constitutional matter, the Governance Audit and Standards Committee. So it does appear that we can actually refer the constitutional issues back, but not necessarily stop the decision. And I think that's probably the best way in which we should deal with this. I think Councillor Smythe's proposal, seconded by Councillor Madden, does more or less do that. And if that was the outcome, I'd be happy with that, because I don't think we really want to have further delay on dealing with the applications for planning. There will be a question about how effective it has been in resolving the backlog and making it more efficient, and we can judge that after it's been in operation. We can't judge that before because we don't know. And if we find that there are problems, we will come back to this issue as an issue as to how we deal with it, whether we want to change it or continue with it. So I think those are the issues at stake. And I think I can understand why Councillor Hunt thought that the precedent that Councillor Mason followed was sort of okay. I can see where he came from and how he did that. But I do think there is this bigger issue of how much of the decision making should be left to Cabinet members, to what extent there should be consultation with other people involved, and that's something I think the Constitutional Working Party can grapple with. So I would be happy to take no action on the current decision, but refer these matters to the Constitutional Working Party, which I think is what Councillor Smythe has suggested.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
I don't think that was what was proposed. I think that's what Councillor Smythe said originally, but I think you were quite right earlier, afterwards, to say that we've got two choices. And my understanding is that the proposal made by Councillor Smythe was the first choice, that no action should be taken in respect to the decision made by the Cabinet member on 26th of July 2022. Can I just check through the Chair whether that's correct?
That's correct. I believe that is what Councillor Smythe has put on the table. She would like us, I think, to make some sort of non-binding comment, which also asks the Constitutional Committee to look at this, and could discuss a wording for that if we wanted to. But that, I think, she is proposing no action, and that's been seconded by Councillor Mann.
I would insist on that comment
On the
going
comment,
in,
yes, and
because
wouldn't vote within the
otherwise
absence.
I wouldn't be happy with just letting this go through as another precedent.
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Bearing that in mind, I would support that as well. I think that the crucial bit is it says in the papers here, if the panel is satisfied that the decision was taken with adequate information being supplied to enable the cabinet member to reach a decision, then no further action is required and the matter ends there. From the evidence I've heard, I think that both Councillor Mason back in 2021 and Councillor Lee Hunt both made independent decisions after they'd gone through all the information. So I think they didn't do anything wrong at all.
Thank you. Just to clarify, in case you want to come back again and comment, I think Councillor Smythe's proposal is in a sense a slight third way, because our sending it back under that will not be a complete endorsement of the decision. It will be saying we accept the urgency and therefore we're not referring it back, but we will say that probably that in normal times there are certain other things that should have been considered. Is that correct, Councillor?
That is correct, and I'm not just looking at the urgency, or that is important. I'm also looking at the fact that I think there is some genuine confusion. And that is, to me, almost more important, which is why it's important to take it to the Constitutional Working Group.
So, Councillor Jeffrey, does that change approach? You think you would actually like to say there was no issue at all?
No, I think that you've changed what you said. I think that you originally said a moment ago.
I'm not aiming to change anything, though, but I'm aiming to summarise people's proposals.
But that isn't an option that we've been given, is it? We've got two options here, both laid out on page 2. But can we do that?
I don't know that. Well, I'll pass on to the solicitor in a minute. I don't know. Does our saying that we have no issue with the decision have to be premised on the idea that we think he had full information, or can we say, as a separate comment, we're not actually sure that this was based on full information, but we think in this circumstance we don't wish to refer it back?
You can say the decision stands as it is, end of. Okay. Obiter to that, in a sort of wider sense, you could say, look, having heard evidence before this committee today, it's perfectly clear that there is a disconnect with, for example, what is a material change to the Constitution, where it lives, who does it, how it goes to gas. And that all lives in Councillor Smythe's world of reconsideration by the Constitutional Working Group. For the purposes of Councillor Hunt, the decision is either called in the sense there was inadequate information, or it's not, and he had adequate information, and he dealt with it on the day correctly.
So that
End of chat.
That was my point, Chair.
Yeah.
So I think there are just two choices that we've got, and I thought the recommendation that was being proposed was amended, in effect, to be just the first choice of recommendation.
That does. So is it your advice, Peter, that if we want to make a comment saying we don't fully endorse this decision, that we do have to call in and ask him to reconsider it?
I think if you want to add anything terribly exciting to it, I think that's what you're going to do. But when you look at the structure of what you're actually being asked to deal with here, and Councillor Player has kindly supplied it with me this morning, your options are very, very limited, in the sense that, you've got two linear choices, and if you accept that you aren't going to call it in that sense, it stands as Councillor Hunt made it. Not Councillor Hunt can make it, but we're going to tell him that in ordinary other circumstances we wouldn't have let it go through. Because you're confusing the pragmatism of the decision and you're extending it. He's made a decision as to whether it stands or not.
So we are effectively, as Scrutiny Management Panel, risking setting a precedent that we do think cabinet members can make these decisions without reference to GASC.
Yes.
I
don't understand that legally.
I've said Councillor Barron can go first, so can he go first, and then I would like to make a comment, because I've got quite a lot to say on this point.
I'll just read the relevant bit. What it says here, the panel will either resolve to take no action, which is what I'm asking you to do, in effect endorsing the original decision, or refer the matter back to Cabinet or the decision maker for further consideration. So if you wanted to add any context to it, you could, and you would have to refer it back to Councillor Hunt. You could say, for example, we would thoroughly happy with your decision, assuming that you would consider doing these bits and bobs as well. But I think that's too clunky. I think you've either got to stick to what the current position is, which is the panel would either refer it back, no action, endorsing the original decision, or refer the matter back to Councillor Hunt to make further considerations, setting out the nature of your concerns. So you could add it to the concerns you've got, Councillor Smythe.
I want to be consistent about this. I didn't think the decision was the wrong one. I didn't think it was sufficient of a decision when I advised Councillor Hunt in the committee. The point is, though, that we've learnt, and this has been a very, very useful hearing in that sense, we've learnt that our constitution isn't quite adequate. We've learnt it needs to be looked at when we do the constitutional review, which we're doing. And we've also learnt that there is a good deal of confusion in this area. So I don't think we should be put in the position of saying, and I'm paraphrasing, you're off scot-free, you did the right thing, it's all fine, because I don't feel that. But I do feel that on the balance of probabilities and the balance of the case, the pragmatic case, and the fact that Councillor Hunt couldn't possibly have, and as far as I can see, I've understood exactly what he said, and I can see why he's made the decision he did. That's what Councillor Heaney said. Yeah. We've got to find a halfway here.
Well, I think this is why, and Peter, you could correct me, but part of the reason, Peter, you allowed the call-in on the basis of inadequate information. That's not necessarily a direct criticism of Councillor Hunt. It's saying that actually it's just all the issues were not considered, but considering the ones that he did consider, you might be happy with this decision. But the point is, you think there are things that weren't considered that we now think should have been. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very fair, Councillor Atkins. In the sense that this is one that would ordinarily be a matter for calling. Yeah. I accepted it on that basis.
Unfortunately, it does mean that to do that, we have to call in. I'm going to go to Councillor Brown, then I'm going to speak myself, and then I'll come to you,
Can I ask a question? Because this is about we've got a procedure note in front of us here, which has a section 8, which actually has a description of what we do, and it doesn't seem to link up with what
I think that maybe.
So I think that's another confusion.
Councillor Peter Harris and Councillor and myself had discussions with Peter Bowles, and we think that maybe you could clarify that point slightly. Can we refer this directly to GASC ourselves, or do we need to go back to the decision maker, Councillor Hunt, who would then refer it to GASC if he accepts that we think there was a problem?
I think that's the conventional thing we've always done.
Or he might not. You don't know.
He might not, but there could be implications of that. Why I want to speak. Councillor Brown.
Nobody else? Sure. Okay, thank you, Chair. And actually something that you just said, I think, strikes to the very heart of the matter, and that is that this is a call-in based on an assertion that the decision was made without adequate information. There is no option to do a call-in based on whether we believe that Councillor Hunt acted ultra vires in making that decision. And
there actually is that option, Councillor Brown.
Is there? But it wasn't ticked.
Discussions between the call-in and Peter Bowles resulted in it not being put on the call-in.
I see. In which case, the matter of whether Councillor Hunt and, in fact, Councillor Mason before him acted ultra vires
is an open question.
Is not relevant to the call-in if it's not part of the actual documentation.
Technically, no.
So the decision we need to make is based purely on whether we believe the information deficit that Councillor Brent has presented and his colleagues in the call-in and verbally here today it stands, or whether the points that Councillor Hunt has made in addressing where those particular information deficits lay, specifically with 3.2 referring to the previous decision of gas and 4.15 referring to the numbers, which I feel he's actually answered all the information deficit points that were raised. That's what we've got to make our decision on. I do agree that we do need to have some constitutional decisions made about whether cabinet members have particular powers, but I'm happy to be corrected by the City Solicitor if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's actually our job to make that determination today.
Correct.
Okay.
As such, I would support the committee taking no action.
We can recommend, though, can't we?
Well, I'm going to make a comment now. I am not happy with us simply saying that there was no issue here, and by not calling it in, we unfortunately will be doing that. And I will explain why in terms of the Constitution, and why I do actually think this is much more important than it sounds, and why I think that wasn't what was, that I in effect think is the essence of the problem with Councillor Hunt's decision, is because he didn't properly account for how important this matter actually is. Because we have in our Constitution no absolutely crystal clear statement about whose job it is to set the scheme of delegation. But what we do have suggests to me strongly, and the city solicitor may disagree, but I think it is an open point of interpretation that it's actually reserved to full council. That's what it says in 4.1.3, that's what it says in 15, and nowhere does it say that even in a strong cabinet member model, can the cabinet member make a decision about schemes of delegation in a quasi-judicial committee. Why does this matter? Well, Councillor Hunt could have decided on the day, first of all, to take away my right as a councillor to call in a planning decision without me ever knowing about it, without me ever having a chance to comment on it, without any other councillor scrutinising it that day. Some people in this chamber think that's correct. Some people think it's clearly incorrect. But the proper authority to me is either at least GASC or really full council to vote on whether or not I, as a councillor, representing my, elected councillor representing my members in Corsham, have a right to call in a planning application affecting Corsham. But he has asserted, without any qualification, he has the absolute right to take that from me. And I would say that if I wished to, I could challenge that with judicial review because I could challenge it as ultra vires. Now, the reason we don't want to go down ultra vires route in call-ins is because we don't want to find ourselves ultra vires so that members of the public and other people who don't like our planning decisions can turn around and say, well, you're not following your constitution, thus maybe your decisions of your planning committee could be called into question. I think if we go down that route, it's very foolish. If we write a constitution that sets out in absolute strict terms what is and isn't ultra vires, you carry with it that risk of creating a situation where you can be challenged and people say, well, actually I can take you to court. So in some ways, a constitution which is a bit like the British Constitution, which has unwritten understanding-based elements, is helpful, and a certain level of ambiguity can be useful. And in this circumstance, that is why I like the process of a cabinet member, and I am happy with this interpretation of the Constitution, referring decisions that affect the rights of all councillors, which affect the rights of residents, which change the Constitution via GASC for scrutiny before it comes back to them. Because it means no single individual is taking that decision, and it means that the committee, which under the scheme of delegation has the authority to decide constitutional issues, does actually consider the issue. So I think that is a reasonable, settled compromise. I think it's common practice for GASC to consider our constitutional issues, and I think that is the reasoning behind it. And I'm afraid I don't think Councillor Hunt fully took that into account, because it wasn't anywhere in the report. What was in his mind was the urgency, and I think that was a reasonable, pragmatic decision. But if we ruled today that the decision was therefore fine and it doesn't need to go via GASC, we're effectively handing extra power, which I believe our Constitution does not do, to our already very powerful administration to make decisions about changing the Constitution without consulting any of the rest of us. And I just think that's an unacceptable precedent. So I would kindly ask I will propose referring the decision back to Councillor Hunt with the strong request that he follows the principle of going via GASC, because I think it's a long settled, satisfactory route which allows us to be happy that these decisions are not being taken by one cabinet member individual who already has a great deal of power in the council. So my proposal is, unfortunately, given choices before us, we do refer this back to the decision maker to be reconsidered. Councillor Smythe.
I think that's persuasive and well argued. Can we ask Councillor Madden and legal people if there's any reason why it can't go as an item to GASC this Thursday, so that wouldn't be a delay? Because I do think the matter of delay is a serious one, and it was absolutely behind my
What jumps out at me is there has to be an emergency meeting of the portfolio holder before that to refer it to GASC, and then GASC would have to accept it as an emergency item without
Chair, if I may.
papers. Is that correct?
Chair, if I may, there is a recommendation on the paper that does say it can go to governance and audits. You do have that caveat.
Well, what is your perspective on this?
I think if it's put back to Councillor Hunt in a paper form, he can make the decision, and then he could theoretically refer it on to GAS. I suppose the position is what challenge will come in? Probably none. So the pragmatics of this is get it to GAS by Thursday, having had Councillor Hunt look at it as a recommendation from your call-in process today.
Of us are on GASC, so are well
Yeah.
familiar with this.
Which adds to the pragmatism of doing that. I think you're right, Councillor.
Well, I'm not with you. I'm sticking with my take no action, I have to say. But there are pragmatic things in relation to it. We've got to give members 7 days' notice. Okay. The meeting's already been set up. We hadn't taken any decision beforehand as to what might emerge from this. If you remember this, it was all going to happen on the 13th September, this meeting, and then straight on to gas thereafter to try to speed things up or whatever. So I don't think to give it credit, and members of the public, of course, need to know as well. So I can't see that this can come on as any item other than to note, that's what it says in the meeting for Thursday, to note what happened here today. And I don't think it's fair. And if we are concerned, as we all have been, about making sure everybody's involved and everybody's consulted, I can't see that happening. And the very least then, I have to say then, is at least another 7 or 10 days, I suspect, and we all agree that something needs to be done in relation to the backlog, and here we are. And I have to agree with Councillor Hunt on this. The public won't understand it. Those people who are planning applications in, waiting to be done, won't understand us sitting here crossing T's and dotting I's and going over, paragraph 1-4, section G. I mean, it doesn't work. And I think that we should try to take no action, get on with it, and look to the Constitutional Working Party to do something. Because I think Councillor Smythe is right. There's too much confusion in around that, and we need to clarify what delegated the powers they are, and that members understand them. Because the whole point of this, don't forget, was to have councils run as little governments when the 2000 Act came in, and not to pick up minor points as people will see it, but actually to get on with what we're supposed to deliver. And, the amount of planning applications, and I know it's not the point here, it's whether things happen rightly or wrongly. Councillor Hunt did not take the wrong decision. He did not have inadequate information. He chose to make a decision, right? And that's the sort of thing we need to be looking at. He told us that he knew what had happened in the previous year, but knew or decided he could take the decision for various reasons. If there hadn't even been a light backlog, he may well have taken the same decision. I don't know. But I just think delaying this I think it's atrocious if we actually delay this decision that has been taken. And don't forget, it was in July that it was taken.
Councillor Peter Harris.
I mean, Councillor Madden's made reference to, if it does go on Thursday, that under the Constitution, under the access to agenda and reports before the meeting rules, that can happen. I mean, where a report to be considered a decision-making meeting has not been circulated in accordance with the timescale, under the access to information rules, an explanation will be given by the relative member or the chair. So it's already on paper. I mean, that can be given by yourself as why it's not been circulated.
I don't feel even after today's meeting I'm competent to do that.
Well, that's down to you, but I'm just saying that is in the Constitution because it happens all the time. I mean, I've queried, the reason I know this is because I've queried 3 things recently from a cabinet meeting that weren't on the agenda within the prescribed timetable, and that was the explanation I was given.
It doesn't happen on JANS, okay.
I know it doesn't.
It will be out of our control. We can attach to our recommendations back to the Cabinet member that we would like him to reconsider his decision, we'd like him to refer it to GASC, and we'd like him to do it and request GASC that they hear it this Thursday in an emergency manner, kind of out of order manner, but with the explanation. We can request all those things. Ultimately, those are not within our control. The situation that we are in is we are in the position, and I think unintentionally, but my opinion on the matter is it is Councillor Hunt's decision that has put us in this position of either endorsing what I think would essentially be a constitutional power grab, endorsing the ability to change the Constitution without going via gas scrutiny, or to say that actually we think the decision was based on inadequate information because I don't think Councillor Hunt intended to do that, and so I think the inadequate information, I think the mistake here is that he has unintentionally put us in that position where the Constitution is going to potentially be altered by his actions not following the past precedents. And that's what I think he didn't fully consider. So that's why I am still going to have to vote in favour of referring it back to him. And I would definitely happily do that with the request that he consider it immediately and that it be passed on to GASC in time for their meeting on Thursday, but that won't ultimately be within our control. So that is the choice panels have in their voting. Councillor Brown, and then I think we should move to a vote, because I think we have...
Thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, I must respectfully disagree with your analysis. I don't actually believe that taking no action is an endorsement of what's happened, because we've heard in this very meeting earlier this afternoon, precedent does not trump the Constitution. So just because Councillor Hunt and arguably potentially Councillor Mason before him chose to make a decision in a potentially non-constitutional matter, even though we agree with that decision, we're here to make a decision of whether or not we take no action because the issue of the information deficit has been addressed, or we refer it back because of the information deficit. We couldn't then say we should refer it back because we want the constitutional working group to do something else with that comment. I don't think that taking the refer back option is one that we validly have if we believe the information deficit has been addressed.
I think I was fairly clear that I do think there was an information deficit and it was the constitutional implications. We have been told that if we don't refer back, it is in effect an endorsement of the decision. So I think there's a fairly stark choice before us, the pragmatism or the constitutional importance. I personally have seen the consequences of organisations that get into constitutional disputes, and it tends to get very messy, and I do think it's important, but not everyone may agree with that. Any other comment before we move to a vote? So I think we've arrived at, I mean, technically, I don't know if we have a seconder yet for referring it back. We do have a seconder for not referring it back. Councillor Bader-Harris.
I'll second referral back.
Logically, I would have said it made sense to vote on that first. I think it is an open and shut. Does anyone have a great issue? I think it's the one way or the other. I think there's no room for people to vote both directions. So is everyone happy that we vote first on referring it back?
I do actually, because I think the proposal was first for the first point.
That's fine. Like I said, it's our decision. So the vote before us is we are voting. If you will vote yes on this motion, the motion is that we take no action and we effectively consider that Councillor Hunt's decision was correctly made. So all in favour.
Hang on a second. You're putting words. You're
sorry, word it as you wish.
Yeah, you've just made up a completely different recommendation.
No, you word it as you wish.
Pardon?
Can you word it for me then, please?
It's worded for us already. It's literally worded for us.
Does it make recommendations? It made recommendations.
It does.
It does.
Page 5.
Okay, so, right, members are asked to consider, those in favour of this, no wait, that's the wrong thing. Do we have a report that makes recommendations, Peter, on how we should vote on this?
It's on page 3.
On page
3.
Yeah, okay.
We
right.
understand.
No action, so the vote is this.
So I'm so sorry, Chair, but we do understand that that's what we're voting for, but I would like the advisory note of it going to constitutional being included.
We're first voting on no action.
Yes.
No action is now no action.
I understand it's no action, but I also have always made it clear that I want an advisory note about it going to constitutional working group.
I thought we received advice that effectively that's not something that's possible from the point of view of the council member. I'm not minded, therefore, to vote for that. We would be advised that it's of absolutely no effect, and if we were to make that.
Sorry, could I just say that I'm on this Constitutional Working Party, and I'm more than happy to contact the consultants to say that this idea
I am absolutely 100% sure the Constitutional Working Party will look at this regardless.
I think I was going to say, I think to assuage Councillor Smythe, we can invite you to do that, Councillor Smythe, via Councillor Madden to myself, as an issue for the Constitutional Working Group, and I'm happy to assist you in that.
So the vote is simply no action be taken in respect of the decision made by Cabinet Member for Planning Policy, City Development on 26th of July 2022. The decision will then be effective immediately. All in favour of that proposal? That is 4 in favour. All those against? That is 4 against. I will use my casting vote at this point to vote against. The second proposal on the table, therefore, is that the matter should be referred back to the decision maker for reconsideration, setting out in writing the nature of concerns to be addressed. Do we need to come up with the writing now then, Peter?
Ideally, yes, but...
Okay. I'm going to propose the following writing, but I'll be absolutely open to editing of it. The decision taken and the report provided was based... so is someone noting this down? Are you, someone scribing this? James scribing this? The decision taken and the report considered gave inadequate consideration to the constitutional implication of not following previous examples of referring constitutional changes to GASC for scrutiny before the final decision was taken, and therefore we refer the decision back to the Cabinet member to request that he urgently reconsider and consider making a decision which includes referring the decision to GASC in time for it to appear on as an emergency item on the agenda of the GASC meeting of Thursday the 28th.
Chair, this does feel a bit that you're making it up as you go along.
I am. That's what we're going to vote on. I'm allowed to.
I know, but what it also means is that the councillor involved or the cabinet member involved isn't able to respond to what you've just said.
No, he isn't. That's all entirely proper. It will now be voted on by the members, and if they agree with me, they will be. If not, we're going to have a discussion first about the wording. If anybody is unhappy with the wording who plans to vote for the motion, if you don't plan to vote for it, it sort of doesn't matter. But if people want to vote for it but think I've said something slightly wrong, by all means tell me, and if that'll change your vote, we can discuss changing it.
I haven't got it with me, so I can't really comment.
Can you read it back to me now?
But sorry, Chair, we have to vote on both of them, don't we? Because both could be kicked out.
Yeah, we're about to vote on it. That's the whole point.
The one you voted on is written down. The one you've just done, you spelled out.
Councillor Madden, I just asked, so the recommendation is set out in writing our reasons. I just asked the city solicitor, should we come up with our written reasons first? He advised me yes, so I'm putting on the table a proposed written reasons on which the committee can vote. We can't simply say written reasons, then have me write them later. The whole point is the committee needs to vote on it. So,
well, I'd need to see them in writing before I decide.
That is what we are just
I couldn't understand what you said.
Yes, that is what we are literally doing right now. This is what happens when people don't read their flipping constitutions. Right, anyway.
Chair,
that's just wrong. You just made it up as you go along.
I apologise, Chair, but I do think you were behaving rudely towards me in your objection.
Chair, you just made it up as you go along.
I do apologise for my outburst. James.
Thank you, and do feel free to chip in, Chair, if you don't think I got it quite right. So it's to refer back to the cabinet member. Calling upheld based on inadequate information. To refer as a constitutional matter, refer back to the cabinet member to reconsider and also consider the option of referring the matter to the GAS committee prior to making a decision.
Sorry, can I add a little wording back into it? I think got lost. So it isn't simply just saying so that the inadequate information was the failure to fully consider the constitutional implications of not referring it to the GAS committee.
The exact wording can come from the script.
It can come from the recording. Oh, right, okay. But I think members want to hear it read back to them in exact wording before they vote on it. So, what should we do? Should we pull up the exact wording, or shall I just carry on? So I was saying, because the inadequate information was the failure to fully consider the constitutional implication of not referring it to the Governance and Audit Standards Committee. Therefore, we request that the Cabinet member reconsider his decision by considering referring it to that committee, and do so urgently so it can appear on the agenda of that committee, which is being held on the 28th of September 2022 as an exceptional item. Sorry, today is Tuesday. The GASC is on Thursday. We are requesting that you hold an emergency meeting tomorrow.
We're both here as well.
You may not be able to.
I can't. It's not possible.
You can call. It's just possible to call out of order meetings on the Constitution. You may decide not to, but it is possible to do. Yeah.
No, I'm not here tomorrow.
Right. Well, yeah, later today or on Thursday before GASC.
You told me earlier.
Well, this is simply the wording of the recommendation. This is simply the recommendation of the wording that we are voting on. If you decide not to do that, that is open to you. It is, I think, with enormous. It is with enormous regret we are referring this back to you, because I think none of us want the delay. Yeah. So in the motion, the Councillor Hunt used his best endeavours to do it by the...
Chair, I mean, there is a recommendation which does say it can go straight to the Governance and Audit Standard Committee, which is on Thursday. And I personally think, from pragmatism's point of view, it has to go back to Councillor Hunt anyway to ratify the decision. The fact it's gone through GAS, that would be the most sensible thing to do.
I'm not sure it's within the Constitution for us to refer to things directly.
It is within the recommendation.
Back to the decision maker.
Chair, but it is within the recommendation of the paper that we've been given today of what we're making our decision
The
on.
whole issue today is about following the Constitution. I don't think we should do something which this committee is not delegated.
No, it's not. It's about whether he had adequate information.
I'm going to ask the Chair, if I may, just the City Solicitor, if you can indulge me quickly, that
Can we refer it directly to
item 2 of the recommendation does state, and I mean this is the paper that you would have written, and I probably would have, I would have hoped you have written it, and you have advised that we can go to the Governance, Audit and Standard Committee, and that sits on Thursday, and I think we all agree around this table that it is a matter of pragmatism and being sensible. It has to go back to Councillor Hunt anyway, so, you know, can we do that?
Can we refer this directly to GAS from?
It's certainly within your remit on the paper that I've put to you. I actually think there's going to be a minimal challenge to it, and I'm prepared to proceed on risk.
I have to admit, I understand your position, Chair, but I think there seems to be a consensus going around the table that would be the pragmatic thing to do.
Councillor Heaney?
This is what our procedure note says, and I asked that question a little while ago about whether we could, but
I
didn't
apologise.
get a
thought
clear
it was
answer. So if we can do that, I think we should do that.
Okay. Right. Okay. So change by. So instead of referring it back to the cabinet, we are still referring to the cabinet member, but take away the part about him having an urgent meeting. And instead, we are also referring the decision to GASC to consider the substantive issues made by the decision made by the cabinet member, so that it can consider it as an emergency item on its Thursday meeting and report back to the cabinet member so he can make the decision as a matter of urgency, having had a consultation scrutiny done via GASC. So,
Ask them what is coming to GAS on Thursday then. It's just whether he had adequate information or not.
No, so on Thursday what will be coming to GASC is the entire decision. Do they agree with the substance of it?
Sorry, in that case I think that it should be advertised for members of the public if they wish to come along to it, and we won't be able to do that by Thursday.
That's a matter for GASC. If GASC reject the item, they reject the item.
I know, this is silly now. This is silly. We have people out there waiting for planning applications to be dealt with.
Well, that's
we're
the whole
sitting
reason.
here, you know, sorry?
We are going around. We've had this conversation before.
Thanks for your contribution. You know, I have to say, it looks scandalous and ridiculous to us, right? And I also have to say that I will want a proper paper for Thursday, and it's unfair on officers.
So I take the point, Councillor Mann, that is a matter for GASC. I've said repeatedly from this chair that the decision before us is effectively, do we say we have no issue and uphold the decision, or do we say there is a constitutional problem we think cannot be ignored, and therefore we need to make a recommendation? And we have voted down the idea that we think there is no problem. That's all been perfectly proper. So we are now considering the wording of a call-in vote, which may or may not pass, and if it didn't pass, we'll have to consider what we do after that. But I think it seems to be the emerging view of the committee that they wish to vote first on requesting, and that is all we can do, GASC consider the item, and that's all we can do. We have been put in this position, there is no alternative.
What happens if that is also voted down?
We'll have to find a new recommendation to vote on. Peter?
I was just going to say, I've just checked with James. If you wanted to constitute a properly convened GAS committee for the purposes of consideration this item, so procedurally with you, Councillor Madden, and I don't disagree with you, you could probably have that in a couple of weeks. Now, in a material sense, what's the prejudice, bearing in mind we've been looking at this since June or July of this year? If you're going to get it right, you might as well get it right in 2 weeks' time rather than Thursday. So I'll give you that option in the sense of propriety.
So if you wish to not hear it on Thursday, you can hear it in 2 weeks' time instead. That's your decision.
Chair?
Still no delay for the people out there, sorry. That's who
that is your view, Councillor Madden.
We're here to represent them, not legal positions.
I think that what's happened is that you want for GAS to look at procedure for the future, and actually what the recommendations were about whether the cabinet member made an adequate decision or not. And I think that's got lost because of what you want actually to happen.
For my part, Councillor Jeffrey, that is not what I want. So if I explain what I'm aiming to get out of it, I'm only speaking for myself, but the reasoning here is I believe that the cabinet member took this decision without considering the constitutional implications, which I think are serious, because I think at the moment we have a constitution which we have interpreted, which is not clear, but we have interpreted as requiring him to refer constitutional issues to GASC, and we have always interpreted it in that way, and the reason we have done so is to protect the rights of those members who are not in administration, and so I think that is an important principle, and that's why I think it needs to be referred back to him, because I want to protect the principle that if you are going to make constitutional change from a cabinet portfolio, I want it scrutinised by GASC, or in the alternative, full council. And I think that's what he didn't consider. And that's the lack of information.
But he said he did.
Well, I don't think I consider in my questioning that he didn't give any response which suggested he considered that point, and the perspective of people who sit on the other benches from himself and are not cabinet members. He said that he thought it was all red tape. He said that he considered that it was wasting the public's time. He clearly prioritised the urgency, and I respect that he thought that was important, and but I think he clearly, he said in fact directly, because I noted it down, that some members may consider the constitutional issue more important than the urgency, but I didn't think that at all. I think that's ridiculous.
So he did consider it then?
No, I don't think he did, because I don't think he considered the substance of it. Anyway, we might as well move to a vote on this. So our recommendation is that we consider that the decision was based on inadequate information because it failed to take properly into account the constitutional implications of the decision. We therefore refer it back to him for reconsideration. But in the meantime, we will also refer the issue to GASC, who should conduct proper scrutiny of the substance of his decision and make recommendations to him before he reaches a final decision on the a final decision on the points decided in his meeting of.
I don't really think you can do that.
It's going to both, and GASC will make recommendations that will come to you in time to make a decision.
I think it's a matter of process. You can't fetter the members' decision-making function. In the sense, you've already voted 4-4 with your casting vote. And what you voted on is the matter had inadequate information, and it goes back to the Cabinet decision maker for further consideration, setting out the nature of your concerns. That's one linear position. The next position is what you want to do about the fact that the Constitution is a bit difficult to read and construct. I don't think you can fetter, as a matter of practicality or law, Councillor Hunt's position. I think that's a separate issue, what you want to put to gas, either through me as a city solicitor or through Leo and Councillor Smythe relevant to referral from, say, the Constitutional Working Group. That's a separate thing. I don't think you can conflate and control his decision-making with that process.
So which, well,
you don't...
didn't intend to, so
I was going to say, you don't have to change very much at all. You need to stick with, you're referring it back to Councillor Hunt for further considerations, setting out the nature of the concern. So you accept that he proceeded initially without adequate information. That's all you have to do. The rest of it is a separate issue.
Okay, so you don't need to put that in the recommendation.
Correct.
Sorry. So we don't need to put in the recommendation what we want to happen. We simply have to say that we consider it was made without adequate information because it didn't fully consider the constitutional implications of not sending the decision to GASC for scrutiny before finally making it. And after that, you can make the decision to send it to GASC.
The matter lives with Councillor Hunt in the sense that he can endorse his own decision, at which point we're in a sort of semi-court.
But we wanted to send it directly to GASC, and you said we could.
Oh, hang on. I was going to say he might take the view, quite wisely in my view and advice, that he might like to refer this on to GASC himself, at which point he's following, in inverted commas, and never to be used again, the Councillor Mason model.
Right.
Okay?
If that's fine, if we're all happy with that, and that's what... Yeah, well, I think we all accept that, but we wanted to go via GASC. So we are voting on referring it back to you to go...
Chair.
Yes.
The recommendation 2 says the matter be referred back to the decision maker, brackets, or, as a constitutional matter, the Council was a standing committee. So it's an either or. We do not have to refer it to the decision maker. We can refer it to the Governance Auditor Standards Committee. That's what the recommendation actually says in its wording.
Are you happy with that, Peter?
Maybe if I'm reading it wrong, it seems clear to me.
But it's about the decision that the cabinet member made, not what you want to do again.
I don't think you're reading it wrong. I think I drafted it incorrectly, in the sense that I'm perfectly prepared to say, in open court, so to speak, that the pragmatic thing to do is follow what the process in the briefing document I'm now reading from, which is refer it back to the Cabinet decision maker for further consideration setting out nature concerns, not leapfrogging his function. So I apologise for that, Councillor Healy. It is my mistake and my mistake entirely.
Well, as I said, it's the Eric Morecambe defence. You're playing the notes, but not in the right order.
So that's why I didn't pick you up on it last time, because that's what I thought was the position. So can we now vote on the proposal to refer it back to, as worded, to refer it back to the Cabinet member? All those in favour of referring it back to the Cabinet member for reconsideration? All those against? That's 4-4, but again passed by my casting vote. So that concludes the call-in. We can conclude the meeting there. I'm sorry it went on so long. I think we ran around the houses a few times, but I apologise to those coming in after. But thank you very much, and hopefully won't have to see you for anything similar again too soon. Goodbye.